Welcome to your Time Management Revolution. This is Time Management Fixer Helene Segura. In today's episode, I'll be sharing a previously recorded interview during which we're discussing time management and mind management. Enjoy!
When you wake up in the morning, are you raring to go? Or do you think to yourself, what could possibly be the point? Doing what works will help you see it isn't too late to go after your dreams. We talk with experts about everything from getting in shape to finding work you love. We're your guide to a better life. Now, here's your host for Doing What Works, Maureen Anderson.
Ever heard of something called minimum viable progress? It's one way to turn your life around. The idea is that you do something for, say, 15 minutes a day, and once that's layered in successfully, you can add another 15 minutes to that project every day or add a different project for, say, 15 minutes. Because almost anyone can find an extra 15 minutes in a day, and inch by inch, slowly but surely, you become the person you most want to be, living the life you most want to live. Well, the key is not only to start, but to keep going, and you'll need fuel. Today, that comes in the form of the inefficiency assassin, Helene Segura, my guest on the show today. 2 of her 3 books were Amazon bestsellers, and she's also a popular public speaker who has what she calls a mind-bending framework for decreasing interruptions, distractions, and procrastination. By way of just a little bit more background, Helene's parents encouraged her to work in as many industries as possible while growing up so she could figure out what she wanted to do by the time she graduated from college, which I think is an excellent parenting tip for all you parents who aren't already guilty enough, as another guest recently put it on the show, for not doing enough for your kid. Anyway, now Helene has enough job titles under her belt that it almost reads like the Occupational Outlook Handbook. She's done almost everything, and I've had the pleasure of perusing her recent book, Roadmap to Get Organized, Travelogue, which I also can't wait for her to tell you about. Daryl Anderson, my husband and producer, and I welcome you back to the show, Helene.
Thank you so much, Maureen. I'm always happy to be with you, too.
I can tell. Your email exchanges are just energetic, which I would expect from a person with your job title, Inefficiency Assassin. I probably tell you this every time, but the word assassin means you mean business.
Yes, it does. And so some people think that, I must be super serious and mean, and I can be at times, but mostly I just like to have fun.
A titan of public relations recently told me that successful people have such a reverence for time, they guard against even unnecessary words, and they sure as heck don't giggle very much because they're working, which is how they became successful. And it occurs to me that you don't start out in kindergarten running businesses. You learn how to do that by growing and changing. And I think one way you want to address the topic of minimal viable progress, Helene, is by addressing how we change.
Yes, definitely. I don't know if people out there are familiar with the 5 stages of change in psychology, and I hate to start out an interview with boring psychobabble, but when you understand all of the phases that you go through, it just makes total sense. So stage 1 is pre-contemplation. That's where you're not even thinking about change yet. Other people might think you have a problem and need to change, but you don't even realize it. Stage 2 is contemplation, and that's where we're thinking, okay, I need to do something, I need to change something about myself or my life in order to make things better. And 3 is preparation. This is where we need to research, we need to plan and attack on how we're going to make this change. Stage 4 is action. That's where you dive in. And stage 5 is maintenance, so you've already made the change, now you need to maintain. And what I found as the common denominator with all of my clients is that they were trying to jump from stage 3 preparation to stage 4 action, and you can't just bypass all of the preparation that you need to do because they were so antsy about getting into action. And so it's really important to stop and think about what changes you want to make and why so you can be successful.
I would have guessed more people would get stuck on the research portion, the preparation, because that's easier to do than act.
Right. But a lot of people just want to make changes right now. And so they go from contemplation where, I need to make this change, into action. Let's dive in and let's make this change, especially at times where people are excited about change, like January for New Year's resolutions and March for turning over a new leaf. People just dive in. There are some folks who get stuck in analysis paralysis, and they might stay stuck in the preparation stage and never move to the action stage. But what I find is a lot of people will do just the bare minimum of preparation and jump right into action, and that's why they're not as successful.
How do you talk them back into the preparation stage when they're so antsy?
Right. Well, we talk about what they've tried so far and how much that has worked. And what they figure out is, I've tried these 10 different things and nothing has worked because basically I'm just trying whatever pops into my head or whatever crazy idea that I hear. So what if instead of taking all of these different leaps, we take a step back, we figure out what the best kind of leap is going to be, and then we can jump in wholeheartedly. So do people want to stop and take the time? No, but eventually they see that they're going to make more progress and more successful change sooner and not take as long if they take a step back and just think about what they need to do and make some plans.
A good friend of mine is fond of saying that exposure teaches. Those steps that you take that are truly action and not only research will tell you so much about what you're trying to pull off and will tell you so much about yourself. But only if you do some reflection. And I don't know if you're finding more of this in your clients these days, but it doesn't seem like the typical life has enough margin to do that reflecting.
I think you're right. We are in such a rush to get so much done that a lot of us have forgotten what it's like to just pause and be still. And a lot of people don't make time for that because they feel like the stillness is a waste of time. And because they're not physically moving, that must mean they're not getting anything done. Whereas if you realize that that stillness can provide you time to recharge and time to think, time to reflect, that is actually going to help you move forward and make a lot more progress. So that's why it's so critical to, if you haven't done it already, schedule in that time to reflect. And if you can't do it at the end of each day for just 5 minutes, what about the end of each week, every Friday evening on your commute home? And just think about, how did the week go? What went right? Let's celebrate that. But then what are some changes that I might need to look at making because there were a few glitches in the week?
Stillness is when your brain gets a lot of work done. Scott Adams.
Which is important.
Yeah, Dilbert creator Scott Adams puts it this way, although I'll botch the exact wording. He says that creativity happens when the watchdog function of your brain is occupied and the rest of your mind can just indulge reveries or entertain different possibilities. In other words, when you're driving or running or showering, the watchdog portion of your brain is busy trying to keep you from getting killed or getting hit by a texting driver or whatever. And the rest of your brain is freed up to solve problems. So if you can remember that's how your brain works, you won't feel as ambivalent about the so-called non-working time because you're probably getting a lot done.
Oh, definitely. And I think that because we are not used to thinking about how we think, that we don't realize how much more productive we are when we do just sit still for a little while and let that watchdog be busy with something else, and that way our brains can generate the ideas that we want to have.
I'm sure there are people who have had a breakthrough while staring at their screen after having stared at that screen for 10 or 12 hours straight. But you don't usually hear of those stories. The eureka moments seem to happen anywhere but in front of a screen.
Oh, definitely. They happen while people are out for a walk, and neuroscience has shown that walking generates the brain activity, so you're a much better problem solver after even only 5 minutes of walking. Sitting still is also a time when people are generating all of these ideas. So, yeah, we just need to stop and think, or walk and think. That's important. You're not going to, if you're just sitting there in front of a screen staring and hemming and hawing, then you're immersing yourself with your blinders on something versus taking yourself away from that situation, just going for a walk, getting out of there.
I've also heard, though, that until you put the time in to work in front of the screen or in the workshop or whatever, the still time, the running, the showering, the driving, won't be as effective. You have to work the problem first, somewhat. In other words, I almost look at it as a message to the heavens. Yes, I'm serious about this. I'm going to put in this amount of time, and now I'm stuck. You take over. Forces that I don't understand can take the reins for a little while.
Right, exactly. It's not like you can go walk for 8 hours and then magically all of your problems are going to go away. And this is where that minimum viable progress actually comes in, because the way it's supposed to happen is, and this term is coming out of manufacturing, where you start with this product and you do some test drives on it, and then you reflect, is it working? What could we do differently? Is this a product people really need? And then you keep adding on and building and tinkering, but it's not like you're tinkering for 30 days straight. You're stopping, you're making evaluations, and when you have that stillness time or when you have that walking time, you're able to come back to your product or to your project and continue to make the changes and move forward.
When we come back, one hack I found that made setting New Year's resolutions not silly, and we will let the productivity expert Helene Segura weigh in on that. It's coming up in just a moment on Doing What Works.
Thanks for listening to Doing What Works and to our radio affiliate partners like KBKW in Aberdeen, Washington.
The first time I remember making a list of New Year's resolutions, I was in 9th grade, 14 years old. Maybe I did it before, but this is the first I remember. And I didn't keep the list, but I remember it being very long. And I can imagine someone looking at that list and deciding that the person who wrote it is trying to be perfect. I mean, I had resolutions for every part of life, and I get a little exhausted just now looking back on a list that long. Gradually over the years, I learned something important, which is if you're trying to make a significant change, maybe don't crowd it out with so many other changes that you're trying to make. What would happen if you set about to change one thing about your life? And when I did that, and in this case, it was give up junk food, although I didn't exactly hit the New Year's point for that. I waited till August that year. But my only goal for the following year was to not eat junk food for a year. And guess what? I not only fixed that part of my life, but a whole lot of other things. And I am guessing there's magic to the whole focusing your energy idea. And I want to let the inefficiency assassin, Helene Segura, weigh in on that. She is my guest today. And Helene, what do you think?
I wholeheartedly agree with that, because if you're trying to make so many major changes all at once, it's spreading your brain waves pretty thin because you have to put your thinking and your energy towards so many different goals. So if you focus just on one major one, you can start with that, put all of your focus and energy toward it, and then once you build that goal up and it becomes a habit, it becomes a routine, then you can go ahead and add on something else.
It makes me remember what I have so often thought about dreaming of a life that's more filled with exciting things when I haven't been able to necessarily pull off with panache everything I already have going. And again, I keep referring to the heavens, but a lot of this is mysterious, and I almost wonder if the heavens are thinking, yeah, right, you think you can handle this brand new thing? You can't even manage what you're doing now. Now, it's an awful form of self-talk, but I do it all the time. And I think there's probably something to it.
And maybe part of the message is you should drop one of the things that you're trying to do because it's not a good fit for you. Just because we want to try something doesn't mean it's the best idea for us. Sometimes we get an idea based on somebody else's life or something that we see on television and we think, oh yeah, I should do that. But when you start to think about it, maybe it doesn't really make sense. But because we don't stop and think about it, we just dive in and we try to do it. So maybe, Maureen, the universe is telling you one of those things that you've been trying and you're not really good at, maybe it shouldn't be a part of your life, and instead focus on this other exciting new change that you'd like to make.
Well, it's a foundational time management principle, isn't it? That it's not only what you want to do, but when you're going to do it. And if a person's calendar is already stuffed, good luck convincing your brain you're serious about this new thing. The brain wants to know that you've cleared out part of your calendar for that.
Cleared out part of the calendar, or because you mentioned, do we have time to put this on our schedule? There's a different way of looking at your schedule. So you can look at replacing, if you truly feel like your calendar is totally packed, is there something that can come off the calendar that's not as beneficial to you, and you can go ahead and replace it with this new change that you want to make. Or you can look at your time leaks, and you can see where you are losing time in the day. Time leaks are where you procrastinate or get distracted or you jump into social media, and you may not do it for hours at a time, but when you add up all your leaks throughout the day, it does add up to hours. If you can catch where those time leaks are and trim them back, then you can gain time that way and have room in your schedule for this new change. And the other thing you can do with your schedule to find more time is see if you can do a little rearranging. For instance, if your new change is you wanted to work out, but you have absolutely no time by the time you get home from work, there's no time in the schedule to work out, think about the time you leave from work. So if it takes you an hour and a half to get home from work if you leave at 5 o'clock, but if you left later, you'd be able to get home in half the time. What if you found a gym near work? So right after work, you walk to the gym, you go work out, and then you drive home. You're still home at the same time, but you've now gotten a workout in at the gym. So you can look at how you could possibly rearrange your schedule. So there are different ways that you can go about finding time in your calendar if you really want to make that change.
When we come back, I'm curious to know where Helene's clients are most excited to find new sources of time they didn't realize they had. That's ahead on Doing What Works. The Happiness Project's Gretchen Rubin has a saying that at first struck me a little cliche, but darn if it isn't very wise as well. And I guess that's one way cliches become cliches. She says, make it easy to do right and hard to do wrong. It reminds me of someone else I know of who sleeps in his workout clothes to eliminate one of the excuses people have when it's time to work out. Oh, I have to get dressed to work out. He sleeps in his workout clothes, and guess what? It isn't a pair of slippers next to his bed. It's a pair of sneakers. So right off the bat, He's ready for a workout, and if he can just make himself walk out the door, he's 90% of the way there because, as someone put it, 90% of success is showing up. Helene Segura is a productivity expert who joins us on this show today, and before the break, I told you we were going to find out when she's talking with her clients where they're most excited to find that they actually do have pockets of time that maybe we're hiding in plain sight, Helene. What are those?
One of the major areas is actually losing time to technology and losing time to their phones because it's become such a natural part of our lives that we aren't always conscious that we're grabbing our device and we're spending time in it. So once I have them start tracking their time, they realize, wow, do you know how many times I grabbed my phone today just to mindlessly check email or jump onto social media? So they find that they lose a lot of time that way. Now, granted, I'm not saying that you have to stay off all social media and you have to never check email, but when they are controlling when they check those items, then they gain their time back. Another big time loss was television, because they come home, they just automatically turn on the TV, and then they realize that they pretty much do nothing because they become glued to the television. Even if they think that they work well in front of the TV, they're not really working. So they lose a lot of time to that. And then another biggie was commutes. There were quite a few folks I was working with who had an hour, hour and a half, 2-hour commutes. So what we looked at was trying to slide their commute times around to see if they could find out what the traffic patterns were in their area. So should they leave a little earlier? Should they leave a little later? How can we gain back some of that time so they're not spending as much time commuting?
The most interesting thing to me about that one, Helene, is that, this is going to sound snotty, but I'll just blurt it out, that these people needed you to point that out. Isn't that a basic part of commuting, that you figure out when it's going to be the least amount of help for you?
When you get into a habit, even if it's not a good one, you tend to stay stuck in it, which is a good thing about a habit if it's a good habit. So when these folks are saying, well, I have to leave at 7 a.m. because I need to be at work by 8:30 a.m., there's no way around it. They've got their blinders on. This is their routine. This is what they're going to do. So it hasn't even dawned on them to think about, could I leave 30 minutes early? I get to work a little earlier, but I can catch up on some things. I could make some personal phone calls before I actually need to clock in. They don't think about it because they're in that rut. And then once you're in a rut and you're frustrated or overwhelmed, you tend not to expand your mind about what are all of the other possibilities out there. It takes somebody else, an outsider, to point that out because your brain is still so stuck in this rut.
You made a great case for enlisting the help of someone like you, Helene, because we all have blinders. And the tricky part about them is the same as assumptions. You don't know you have them or you're making them. Sometimes you need somebody else to point that out. It also brings up the issue of, it's not just habits and ruts, but it's big parts of your schedule that are devoted to things you're no longer as in love with as you once were. And it makes me think of piano lessons for our daughter. When she was in first grade, she was over the moon to take piano lessons. And, we had the usual ups and downs a little bit when she realized that with lessons come practice. But we got over the hump 1 or 2 or 3 times, and she had 6 or 7 or 8 years of really enjoying what learning how to play the piano was adding to her life. We were about to sign up for her 9th year when I realized the energy between us had shifted, and it wasn't good. And I thought to ask her, maybe I've talked with you about this before, Helene, what do you like about piano lessons? And she said, being able to say I haven't quit. And an alarm went off, and I thought, okay, what do you not like? And she said, lessons, practicing, and recitals. And I'm like, so everything else? And she said, yes. And we looked at each other, and we're like, okay, we're all done. But you know what? I think had neither of us stopped to just ask ourselves how signing up for another year felt, she might have taken another 4 years of lessons just because she'd taken 8. And I think a lot of us live like that.
Yes, and this goes back to reflection. We don't pause to reflect on what we're doing. We just keep on doing the same old because, it's in our schedule. That's what we're supposed to keep doing. Instead of reflecting on what joy am I getting out of this? How is this benefiting me or my family, our well-being, and is this something I need to keep on doing? So good for you for even pausing to come up with those questions. That means you are reflecting, and then you went a step further by communicating that and asking your daughter about how she felt. A lot of times we just think, okay, that other person's fine, they know what they're doing. We don't take that extra step to ask the questions.
It's like what a friend's second of 3 wives said about marriage. It's not necessarily hard work, but you do have to pay attention.
Mm-hmm. Yes, you do need to pay attention. And I'm sorry, I just needed to crack up on the second of 3 wives. So,
makes you wonder if he was paying attention to the second.
Right, exactly. Yeah, we do need to pay attention, and we do need to communicate. That's part of the maintenance. In the stages of change, after action, there's maintenance. Part of the maintaining is not just doing this over and over and over, but it's also reflecting and thinking and making sure that this is something you want to keep doing.
We're going to venture into the woo-woo in the next segment, but there are people who make way more money than almost anybody listening who are big fans of this particular brand of woo-woo. So we'll make it worth it for you to stay tuned to more of my discussion with Helene Segura in just a moment on Doing What Works.
Want to see a short video clip from the show? It's on the homepage at MaureenAnderson.com.
Welcome back to Doing What Works. I'm your host, Maureen Anderson, and for you longtime listeners, who are my favorite people in the world, by the way, you may remember this show used to be called The Career Clinic, and as such, we did so many shows about resumes. That's one reason I moved on from The Career Clinic. But what we're going to talk about in this next segment of the program with productivity expert Helene Segura involves something that I think is a little bit woo-woo. But during the commercial break, I thought, woo-woo, woo-woo, what does that remind me of? It reminds me of woo-hoo, which was something the Roadrunner used to say.
Daffy Duck.
Daffy Duck. How is he related to the Roadrunner?
Warner Brothers cartoons.
Okay.
Same family. Yeah. No, he's a duck, and the Roadrunner is a Roadrunner. They're birds, but they're not really.
I was going to ask you what the Roadrunner was.
A bird.
What kind?
A Roadrunner. There is a real bird called a Roadrunner. No, I'm not kidding you.
Well, as tangents go, I'm learning a lot.
You did learn a lot.
Okay, so there was this one Daffy Duck.
Correct.
Cartoon that involved resumes.
I think it was a panel of the Far Side.
Yeah, that makes sense. Go ahead.
Well, he was talking about his resume, and the resume listed his past experience, and one line was, ran around a lot and went woohoo, woohoo. And then there was a pause for some other, actual legitimate job thing. I don't know what the description was or whatever. And then the thing following that was, again, ran around a lot and went woohoo, woohoo.
Oh, well.
That was really a useful,
yeah.
good use of the time there.
If you want to have more exciting things on your resume than Daffy Duck, and don't we all, I'm going to suggest something that seems to be eerie in its predictiveness, and I bet you spend more time sneezing or burping in the course of a day. I'm not kidding. Affirmations. Helene Segura, productivity expert extraordinaire, I want you to weigh in on affirmations because I tried it, and then I stopped, and what I wanted fell away so fast, I thought, man, I am always doing my affirmations. What's the secret to them, or why do they work?
I don't think they work for everybody.
Oh.
But if they work for you, then keep doing it.
Okay. Do you do them?
The series. I do affirmations when I'm feeling insecure or when I'm nervous. I find that's when they help me. And that's to help move the brain into positive thinking and being more confident. And that's the underlying principle of affirmations. So just because you get into this habit of, okay, I need to say my affirmation this morning, I need to say my affirmation tomorrow morning, if it's just from rote memory and it doesn't have true meaning, you're not really doing anything, versus if you are all in on what you're saying and what you're believing, then those affirmations are going to work.
Because it focuses the brain. I find that in the course of the day then, if I'm not doing at least some things to make those dreams come true, I'm not doing my share.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
So you're not...
Affirmations they're not magical. You need to do something else to support them after you've said them.
Right. But if you are doing that, I think there is something to be said. Some people put a Post-it note on their screen, in the corner of their screen. The one thing that they will be disappointed not having pulled off today or in life. Mm-hmm. And it's another sign of how distracted many of our existences are, that we almost need that physical reminder.
A lot of people need that physical reminder, and you're exactly right, because of our distractions, because we have so much swirling around up in our heads that we lose our way mentally. We lose focus, and then we get off track, and then we don't do what we're supposed to do in order to support what we're saying in those affirmations. So that's a part of being successful with whatever change you want to make or whatever goal you're trying to achieve, is to play mind games with yourself and figure out what is the best thing that I can do to motivate myself, to remind myself, to kick myself in the pants, to give myself a pat on the back, to do whatever it takes to move forward and achieve that goal. And if it means having a sticky note on your computer that you look at every single day, or if you have a holder for your cell phone and you have a reminder right there, if you check your cell phone all the time, sometimes we need constant reminders. However, that sticky note might just become a part of your environment, and the blinders go up, and you completely look past that sticky note, so that's where the mind games come in. You have to figure out, okay, what's a different way now that I can remind myself?
That's such a great point. We call it becoming part of the furniture. If we start setting things out for a trip too far in advance, pretty soon they look like furniture and we look past them. I mean, we
right.
Proof? How big was that portable bed we left with Katie? We stayed with...
It was a queen-size inflatable mattress, yes.
And we walked by it on our way out the door from a week-and-a-half long visit. Even after a few days, it looked like it belonged there. Unbelievable. All right, and to get back to what we were talking about, Helene, the thing I sometimes do is I just white-knuckle it through whatever change I'm trying to make. And if I can go long enough, sometimes it's 21 days, as the cliche is, or sometimes it's much longer. But if I can just get to the point where I say, okay, this is who I am now, I don't want to be the person who goes back to the old me. I like this new part of me, and this is my identity, and there you go. And so I become loyal to it for that reason. So when we come back, we're going to dive a little bit more into the maintenance aspect of making changes in your life. That's ahead on Doing What Works.
We have the best radio stations bringing you Doing What Works every week, like KZNG in Hot Springs Park, Arkansas.
Back with Doing What Works. I don't know if you've ever set a goal to lose 20 pounds or get your PhD and reach those goals and then felt sort of yucky because, one, how do you maintain the weight loss? Or two, what's the big next mountain to climb? You don't want to go to the work of getting another PhD necessarily, but there's so much maintenance involved in making changes to your life that stick in a good way. Helene Segura is the author of The Roadmap to Get Organized Travel Log, which if there is a more detailed instruction manual for looking at your life as a road map and planning your trip more effectively. I don't know what it can be, Helene, and you can take a minute or so to give people a commercial for that.
Oh, fantastic. That book came about because some of my clients were struggling with, after I leave and I'm not there to help them through, they kept on saying, okay, what am I supposed to do next? And that overwhelm would creep in. So this is all of the thinking and planning that should go into step 3, preparation, when you're trying to make the change, that most of us don't stop and think about because we're so busy in this perceived need to run around. And so the roadmap to get organized walks you through figuring out how you think, how you react to different situations, what's your working style, and then it also gives you some language to use with yourself to play those mind games. So once you figure out how you tick, then you can figure out your motivation and map out your plan and stick to your plan because you're motivated to do it. So that, in essence, is what the roadmap to get organized is about.
And if you're the kind of person who likes directions and detailed steps, you will love this book. I just wanted to throw that in. All right, Helene, again, when we're talking maintenance, it's not enough to layer something in and pull something off. You then need to build on that, or you're not growing, and then maybe you don't die, but you might as well because you're dead inside. So talk to us about that. We only have a few minutes left, but I want to make this what you most want to leave people with.
What I found interesting was the second note that you mentioned when you talk about once we've reached this plateau, where do we go from here? And that's what I notice a lot of people feel. So we feel like the rush of making this change, that adrenaline that we have, the excitement that we have about making the change, it's gone. And so now what do we do next? So I know we've talked about how you need to focus on only one thing, but as you're reaching completion, it's really important that you celebrate, but then look ahead to, what do I want to accomplish next? Do I want to build on this goal that I've achieved or this new habit that I've created, or do I want to look at something new? So what is that next phase of my life that I'm going to move into that is going to further support the person I want to be?
I'm only guessing, but I imagine part of the problem with coaching people through this is the idea that they're never going to get to a point where they can coast. I mean, life is a lot of work, and even really successful people, if they're happy, they're always setting new goals for themselves and working even harder, it seems like, because they love it, for one thing, but...
Right, and it's a part of being human, because if we become complacent, we basically just become a couch potato, for lack of a better term, both mentally and physically. So we're always looking for a new way to improve ourselves, but the key is you don't want to constantly add on improvement after improvement after improvement just to add them on. You want to make sure that you're totally conscious of what you're doing and why you're doing this, and making sure it's a positive change in your life. And not trying to do everything at once, but just focus on one change at a time. And, you know, just like we're always going to have a to-do list because we have a very full life, you're never, ever, ever going to have an empty master to-do list because there's always something else that you want to achieve. And that's the same thing with the goals in our life. We're always going to have something new we want to try and experience, because I think that once you've stopped desiring something new, then you've kind of stopped living.
And we don't want you to do that. And Helene,
No.
I think fewer people will do that thanks to the hour we just spent with you. We can't thank you enough. And I should mention your website, Helene, Helene, Segura, Segura, HeleneSegura.com to learn more about her work. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you so much, Maureen and Daryl.
And that'll do it for this edition of Doing What Works.
This broadcast is copyrighted by North Shore Productions. To learn more about the show, you're invited to visit MaureenAnderson.com. You can read Maureen's blog, listen to her podcast, or pass along suggestions for the program. I'm Cindy Weir. Thanks for listening, and tune in again next week for more great advice and inspiration on Doing What Works.